All right, welcome to Living in the Past, where two middle-aged dudes relive their past by enjoying the pop culture of their youth. Devin, are you ready to get a new partner, have suicidal tendencies, snipe bad guys from a mile away in the desert, get electrocuted by the guy in Die Hard that eats candy bars, and fight a crazed lunatic in your friend's front yard?
Wow. I'm pulling all kinds of memories for this one, Jeremy. This sounds like the summer camp that I never got to go to as a teenager. This sounds amazing. What movie are you talking about?
Oh, we are doing Lethal Weapon, 1987.
Nice.
Richard Donner classic. You know, we had on tap about a month ago Superman. And I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
Let's get rid of that Richard Donner film and let's do this other one.
Yeah.
Lethal Weapon. We did a kind of a Patreon, like, here we go, year 3, which, by the way, this is the first episode of year 3, Devin. Unbelievable. It started.
We're about 6 years into the midlife crisis, and that's just our mile marker. All right, I'm going to write this down. I've just lost count at this point.
Yeah, we're doing Lethal Weapon. We were on the kind of the Patreon pod called What You Talking About, and we were talking about like what are the best non-Christmas Christmas movies, and Lethal Weapon was one of them. Christmas is happening at the time of the movie, and we were like, you know what? Why not?
If Die Hard's a Christmas movie.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Which I still have to watch this year, by the way.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, you may need to edit this part out.
Okay.
In fact, please do, because I'm probably going to open my mouth and say something that I probably shouldn't, but just based on, because, you know, we don't want to just leave things in the past. We want to also bring in what's going on in the present. And so at any point in this conversation, because I don't know, I didn't even know until you unboxed
You're flying blind.
What movie we're going to do. Yeah. So will we be at any point comparing and contrasting, as good teachers and students would, Jeremy, comparing and contrasting, perhaps making a Venn diagram when it comes to the Mel Gibson and Kanye West views on Jews?
Hey, we would probably get more listens if we did that.
From all the wrong people.
We would go from 30 to 30,000.
I don't need to make the nightly news. Going viral for all the wrong reasons.
Oh my gosh. We want to say, before we get going into the show, we want to say thank you to our patrons. Patrons, we can't do this show without you. And your support is it means the world. It means the world to us. And you can find us on Patreon at Living in the Past. So just look us up there if you want to see what's going on. Extra podcast, video previews. We are doing stuff on YouTube. In fact, just last week we released a video in a series called The Movies I Missed from the 1980s. And we did Day of the Dead 1985. Nice. And that's up right now if you want to go check that out. But we released that about a week early to our patrons to have a look at. In fact, YouTube flags a lot of stuff. And so there's like an early iteration of these videos before YouTube says no, no, no. And we give that to our patrons before it's edited to be suitable for the YouTube audience.
Ridiculous.
And, it's crazy.
Ridiculous.
There was a video I did recently, and I re-edited it maybe 6 or 7 times. It was on the Road Warrior, the Villains of the Road Warrior, one of our best viewed videos. It was getting into the thousands, and then I went through the whole, like, I think it was a 30-day process, Devin, of just like protesting it, trying to like get, you know, saying this is, I'm basically doing commentary review. And they still shut me down as Warner Brothers.
I think you should reach into your wallet and pull out your white privilege card and play it, Jared.
No,
play it.
I need to take a picture of it and send it to them.
Send it to the YouTube.
Lethal Weapon, Devin. When did you first see it, man? When did it show up on the radar for you?
It was in the theater.
All right.
And I mean, so we have a friend, and some of our patrons and listeners will know this mutual friend from high school, a guy named Paul. And Paul was interesting, Jeremy, because Paul and his other friend Eric were very much, how should I? Well, by today's standards in 2022, we would call them live action role players.
Okay,
but they saw movies like Lethal Weapon, and
did they?
Then they would, Jeremy, I kid you not, they would strap freaking 45 auto under their jacket and like walk into banks.
Of course,
just to see what would happen.
Why not?
Yeah,
that's so disturbing.
It's the 80s, baby. It's the 80s. So all that to say that very fond memories.
Yes.
And we've talked about different films, Jeremy, that have like fight scenes. This though might have one of the best fight scenes.
It's good stuff
in cinema.
It's good stuff. I mean, I, like you, saw it in the theater. It was it came out in March '87, and it was our spring break.
Yeah.
And of course, this is a time in the 80s where movies play for months and months and months, but it had been out for a few weeks. It kind of was making the rounds at school and like, hallway conversations about, oh, have you seen Lethal Weapon? It's pretty awesome, you know? And so I bought a ticket. I can't even remember it was some PG movie and walked right into Lethal Weapon.
Yes, way to fight the man.
You got to do what you got to do. And from the get-go, I was like, okay, because you have the prostitute who's really central to the story, jumping to her death. And I'm like, what am I watching? This is crazy.
Yeah,
and then, of course, you go right from that to Mel Gibson's introduction.
Right.
Like, it's just, wow, okay, pedal to the metal, Shane Black writing. The dialogue was, like, unbelievable.
Salty.
And it was. And I don't know about you. We had 48 Hours come out a few years prior. So you had the Nick Nolte, Eddie Murphy it wasn't really sort of a buddy cop show. It was kind of, but this is these guys are both police officers.
Right.
So you have 48 Hours do it like before, and they do it very well, by the way. It's probably a movie we need to cover at some point. But Lethal Weapon just had something a little bit different, and because they're not punching each other every second.
Right.
Just like in 48 Hours. But it has a lot of that same DNA that 48 Hours has, but there's something more, and I think a lot of it has to do with just the memorable performances of Mel Gibson and Danny Glover. Not to say Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy was a star, like the biggest star,
right?
But there was just something different about it, and I think it was the mystery of Riggs's character, Mel Gibson's character. It's the I'm too old for this shit. Kind of Murtaugh's like, I'm ready to be done.
I so identify with that character at this point in the journey.
Isn't it amazing? When we were kids, it was like, we're all Mel Gibson. Now we're just like, totally.
Just want to get to the retirement date.
Just give me retirement. It made a crap ton of money. It grossed over 120 million against a production budget of 15.
That's crazy.
So it made a lot of money. It was nominated for Academy Award for Best Sound. It had 3 sequels, a TV show. They're talking about making another movie. And so, I mean, why not?
Reboot it.
We're seeing I just saw did you see the preview for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny?
I have purposefully, I'm saving myself, Jeremy. I'm saving myself for opening night.
Did you get like a little Indiana Jones promise ring? Were you wearing that?
Yes. Awesome. Yes, I did.
Awesome. I'm a slut, man. I watched it like 4 or 5 times. It's fine. But I mean, you got another Lethal Weapon coming out. I'm sure they'll roll out Danny Glover and Mel Gibson for it, I guess. I mean, probably protests, but Lethal Weapon though, 87, it just hit at the right time.
Yeah.
Great movie. Richard Donner, man. People don't talk about Donner enough. I mean, I'm looking here at his filmography.
Confused with like Blitzen and Rudolph a lot. He just gets thrown in there. I'll be honest with you.
I know. It's really crazy because he, of course, was making movies. Like the last film I saw of his where it was kind of like his thing.
Yeah.
Was a Michael Crichton book made into a movie called Timeline. Did you ever see that where they go back into like medieval
was like early
time?
2000? Oh, no, like
it was 2003.
Yeah.
So
I do remember
that. That was kind of like he made Timeline. Before that, he made Lethal Weapon 4. But he made a movie called Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson that Julia Roberts. I really like that.
Yeah, well, you had me at Julia Roberts.
He made Maverick, of course, Lethal Weapon 3, Lethal Weapon 2.
Yeah.
he made Scrooged. And a
Yeah.
lot of people don't know he made that.
Yeah.
And so he made Scrooged. He made The Goonies, but he also made a movie that I feel is overlooked for a lot of reasons. And it's a fantasy film with Rutger Hauer and Michelle Pfeiffer and Matthew Broderick called Lady Hawk. Was
Yeah.
that ever on your
Yeah,
radar?
it was, because that was part of that kind of whole like fantasy reboot of the 80s. And, we've talked about like Beastmaster a long time ago on the show, and it kind of just fell in there. And I agree with you. It's like doesn't get the props that it deserves.
It had a weird score by Tangerine Dream that really threw a lot of people. I've heard there's a version of it with a more classical, like John Williams-esque score.
Interesting.
And that it plays a little bit different.
Yeah.
But I love the story of Lady Hawk. We have a colleague here at work, Daryl, and just mentioned that movie to me a while back.
Yeah,
Just like,
yeah.
have you seen that? I'm like, how do you know about that? So Lady Hawk, just a great movie. But of course, The Goonies, Superman, The Omen. I mean, Donner's just made so many great movies.
Now, did he also do Gremlins or no?
He didn't do Gremlins.
Okay,
He
I couldn't remember.
I think Spielberg was the one involved with that,
Okay.
and they got someone else to direct that. But he, my goodness, The Goonies was his film.
Yeah.
85, then Lady Hawk, then Lethal Weapon, then Scrooge, then Lethal Weapon 2. That little run is pretty impressive because a lot of people say Lethal Weapon 2 is the best. I'm not in that boat, but a lot of people I talk to think that's the superior Lethal Weapon.
I mean,
movie.
apples to oranges in my opinion. But going back to Donner, though, do you feel that he is, for the hits that he put out,
right?
Is he the most overlooked director of that era?
Of the 80s, I think he might be, just in terms of like making hits,
right,
and not getting the name recognition of some of the other directors of that time. I think he's one of those guys.
Yeah.
I think he was done very wrong with Superman 2, and a lot of people might not know this story, but he was filming Superman 2 kind of together, and shot most of 2, had a falling out, gets replaced by Richard Lester, who would later direct Superman 3, which is garbage. And Lester like kind of makes Superman 2 a little more campy.
Yeah.
And, there's a little, like, if there's a silly scene in Superman 2, it's Lester's work.
Yeah.
But Donner's version of 2, which they have since, it's been re-edited, it's like the Donner version.
The Donner release.
But I really feel like, man, that's such a bummer because I really think he had an interesting thing going with Superman.
Yeah.
The original Superman, the movie. And it's a bummer that in 1980, Superman 2 doesn't get, like, he isn't able to finish what he was really trying to do.
For sure.
And that's I've always been bummed about that because I think there was something special happening. And of course, the Richard Donner cut came out like one of the last projects he was involved with, and that was in 2006.
Wow.
So of course, I believe Donner died recently, man. I think he died in 21.
Was it that recently?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Wow.
So he died in 21.
Okay.
And he just died at 91 years old.
Good night. Good night.
Yeah, lived a long, awesome, life as a filmmaker. He did so much. He was in television too, but Lethal Weapon is something really unique. It's one of those like staples of the 80s. It's one of those movies you often think of when you think of like action films, 1980s. Gibson was a star, but I think this really put him over the top. I mean, we did a Mel Gibson film recently, The Road Warrior. Obviously, Gibson brings with him so much baggage based on the things that he has said and done.
Right.
But his work in the films that he's been involved with and the people that he's collaborated, he's made some really special films and stories. And it's really a bummer that his personal life like kind of clouds some of these amazing things that he was a part of making.
It's a shame he's a douche.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
I think that like, and talk me back from the ledge, but like Road Warrior, and even Mad Max, I think like they had more of a cult following beginning. I think they gained their traction of popularity with VHS rentals and things like that.
Right.
Whereas I think that, yes, he was a known commodity, but in the United States, I think this was the vehicle to stardom. And
I think
he
it was.
ruled the 80s on so many levels.
I mean, it is staggering to think of the projects he was involved in. So he makes, of course, Mad Max was in 79.
Yep.
And, Mad Max 2, he made a movie called Gallipoli about the First World War.
Yep.
Heart-wrenching film. Then he made a movie called The Year of Living Dangerously that really got a lot of attention. That was in 82. So Mad Max 2, or The Road Warrior, was released in 81, came out in the States in 82. So he has two big films in 82.
Yeah.
84, he has The Bounty,
which,
talk about a film that a lot of people like, they know the story because of an older version of the movie.
Right.
But when you look at the cast, it's like Anthony Hopkins is Captain Bligh, and Daniel Day-Lewis is in this movie. Mel Gibson's in it. I mean, it's just like, what am I watching? But he made that in 84. Made some other films that were kind of like, but then had Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome in 85, and then Lethal Weapon 87, and then he kind of goes on a run.
Yeah.
He goes Tequila Sunrise, Lethal Weapon 2, Bird on a Wire, Air America. He made a Hamlet movie, Forever Young, Lethal Weapon 3, The Man Without a Face, and then he did Maverick, and then boom, Braveheart, 1995.
Yeah.
And then everything was an A-list up until some of the comments he made that kind of like, and just kind of drunk. And it was all after... Funny is, like, a lot of it happened after he made The Passion of the Christ in early 2000s. It all just kind of fell apart. So,
the irony.
Yeah. Is Gibson one of the biggest stars of the 80s?
Ooh.
Or should we think of him more as a star of the 90s? Because he is a star. He's one of those stars we don't have anymore. We have maybe a couple, but like he was one of them, I think.
I mean, I think that I would go, so this is 87. Yeah, I mean, that 87 to, what did you say Braveheart was?
95 was Braveheart. He won the Academy Award for Best Picture, Best Director.
Yeah, I think that's his window right there. Because after that, we get things like, when does Signs come out? That comes out in like 2001 or so.
Signs is 2002.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, I mean, he does We Were Soldiers and Signs in 2002.
Listen, I loved We Were Soldiers. We Were Soldiers until I read that it was filmed in the foothills of the San Fernando Valley, and that's why there's a bunch of freaking oak trees.
You gotta keep it authentic.
Yeah.
Did Lethal Weapon 4 in 98. I had a weird experience with the fourth film.
Whoa.
I saw it in Budapest.
Oh.
And kind of their big, multiplex there. It was pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And what was interesting was the theater there, it was one of the first experiences I ever had, go figure, where you bought your ticket for a specific seat.
Oh.
Like I had just been used to, like, you go in
right.
And so I was like, what is this thing these Europeans are doing? Of course, we were doing it in the States, but I was from Alabama and
that's another episode.
Stone Ages, right? But it was hilarious because I'm sitting there watching Lethal Weapon 4 and it's in English, subtitled in Hungarian.
Whoa.
And I'm watching it, and I am laughing my butt off as the only one in the theater laughing. So I would laugh, delay by 2 or 3 seconds, and the theater would laugh. And I was like, yeah.
That is
But
amazing.
it was a little awkward, My buddy that I was with was Hungarian, kept elbowing me, like, stop, man. Like, just stop. We get it. You know English.
Oh, my gosh.
But it had great fun. It was more the audience, I think, than the film.
Was that the downfall of the cinema experience when you could book your seat ahead of time?
I don't know. There's something fun about getting in line and trying to find your spot.
Totally.
Saving seats and getting in fist fights. Oh, no, that didn't happen. But these are our places.
Do you remember at Star Wars Celebration in Orlando when you and myself and Carl the Intern went at like 0:30 in the morning to get in line?
Oh, yeah.
And then somebody else that was a part of that podcast showed up 2 hours later and just kind of blended in with us.
Yeah.
What is that? What is that? Jeremy, we were literally like 2 miles down a service road in the darkness of Orlando.
We were suffering.
Yes.
And
he just blended in with us.
He just showed up.
And we wouldn't claim him either. We're just like, what are you doing? Who are you?
Get to the back of the line. You did not suffer like we did. Oh, that was oddly, that whole experience was a fever dream for me. I was really sick right before that. And then here I am sick, standing in line for hours, 4 a.m. on, and homie shows up. Yeah, there is something special, though, fighting to get your spot and getting your spot and then watching the movie. Those days are gone, sadly. Although, I mean, I guess you could go to a Comic-Con and, relive it all.
I ain't standing outside for shit, Jeremy. Give me my reserved ticket. I can cruise in.
Yeah.
My cargo pants jiggling from the Mike and Ike's in the cargo pockets.
So Gibson is, a lot of people say, oh, he's the star, but Glover is something else in this movie. And I think he, in a way, it's hard to explain, but it's almost like Gibson is sort of the flair and the excitement, but it's Murtaugh's character is the through line.
Right.
For the I just feel like, and Glover's performance is so good and it's grounded and like there's this believability with him, just like I'm too old for the, and even he does it well in the sequel. I thought, like, 2, he does a great job at it. And of course, I mean, you look at Danny Glover's filmography, it's the same thing. I mean, he's just in film after film. I remember the first, like, around the same time, it might have been a year before. I would have to look up his actual filmography. But yeah, he made, God, look at this. Talk about a run. So he makes Places in the Heart, Witness, Silverado,
nice,
The Color Purple, Lethal Weapon, Bat 21, Lethal Weapon 2, To Sleep with Anger, then Predator 2, Fly to the Intruder. I mean, he's just like ripping them off too, like really good character performances. He's amazing as Mal in Silverado.
Bat 2-1 is an overlooked gem.
Yeah,
really. Gene Hackman plays the opposite.
I think he's in that as well. And it's such a good movie. And he was great as, like, because he kind of has a villain. Oh, he doesn't kind of. He has this villainous role in The Color Purple, and he's a villain in Witness.
Yeah.
Just a bad human. Like. And he's just so good. So he has such range. And then for him to play this type of character in Lethal Weapon right after The Color Purple, it's so like, wow, this guy is such a talented actor and performer. And I really feel like he gives the film this it's so grounded and makes it, I think, special, where Riggs is able to kind of, it's almost like, I'm not a musician, but you have someone like kind of keeping the beat. Yeah. And then someone's able to kind of riff off of that. Right. It's like Gibson's able to riff off of things, but if it isn't for Glover just kind of keeping the beat, right, like, it doesn't work. Yeah. And that's how Lethal Weapon feels. The humor doesn't work unless Glover is just keeping the straight man to, it's just so wonderful how they work together.
Well, and I think that you touched on that there is, I'm thinking of other like comedy duos, right, where the straight man or straight woman like plays that part well. Yeah. Yeah. And there's not a whole lot. Right. Right. And, like, honestly, here's a callback for you, Jeremy. Okay. Give me George Burns and Gracie Allen as far as someone who plays like the straight man so well. Yeah. Yeah. And is just like that, like you said, that constant but steady flow. Absolutely. Where everything else is based around. Because the character that Mel Gibson plays is, and you mentioned this earlier, like so many like teenager, young adult boys would be like, oh, I love this. Like he's full of like all the testosterone and everything else. Does anyone else pull that character off? That's an actor in that time period?
Man, it's hard. I mean, what Gibson does is he plays the crazy. Yeah. And there's this madness to him. Yeah. And I don't know if anyone acting like A-lister at this time can probably do this.
Gary Busey.
Well, let's throw Gary in there. Yeah, you got two crazies going at it at the end, which makes the film special.
Yeah.
And that's such a, when you look at the story, you have Gibson's character Riggs, his wife has passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And you find out more about the story in the second film.
Right.
But like in the first one, it's just she's died. She's
Right.
passed away, and Riggs is absolutely suicidal.
Yeah.
And you find out little things. You find out, oh, he was special forces.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he is suicidal and
Right.
erratic and
Right.
willing to take, risks. And then you have this juxtaposition with Murtaugh, who's playing it safe. He's
Right.
trying to retire.
Right.
Of course, the lethal weapon in the first film, it's Mel Gibson. He's this lethal weapon. And,
Right.
And so you got this like Riggs and Murtaugh, they don't get along and they're kind of dismissive of each other in a way. And it just works. But then you have the story. Murtaugh was also in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And a lot of people forget that.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, he's a vet too.
Yeah.
And he gets contacted by a former like buddy of his from the war. And you see in the very beginning a girl fall to her death.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this guy's daughter.
Yeah.
And so he's like, hey, find out what happened to my kid. She got
Right.
into stuff that she got into pornography. She got into drugs. What happened to her?
Yeah.
Help me.
Right.
And there is this, great mystery. Shane Black, the writer, who of course goes on to write a bunch of stuff, make a bunch of amazing things. The script is just it has that right amount of mystery. The characters are intriguing enough that keeps you in it. And then before you know it, you're locked in. When you think back to the movie, and this might be hard, it might not be as fresh in your mind, but was there a moment when you look back on the film where you felt it locked you in and you were like, I'm in? Like, I am not letting go into this movie until it's over with. There's a specific moment for me, and I'm curious what yours is if you can recall it.
I think as, a teenage dude at that time, the
Right.
things that I recall
Yeah.
was the firing range.
Yes.
And when he
Yeah.
when he puts his shoulder out and back in
Yeah,
socket.
yeah,
That's probably, other than obviously the beach scene and stuff.
Right.
Those the clearest things. I'm just like, who is this guy?
Yeah. I think for me, there's the early on, there's that range sequence where he puts a smiley face on. It's just like, oh, you bastard. Great scene. It's building the characters. I think for me, the moment that I'm like, I'm in, I'm intrigued by the story. I want to see where it goes. I don't know if you remember, there's a scene where they visit Murtaugh's buddy from Vietnam, and they're on like a cliff house kind of,
right.
And they're like, what's going on? And of course, you find out there was this drug trade that he was involved in from Vietnam. Like these are some like mercenaries, high paid killers, millions of dollars. We've just stumbled into something way over our heads. And right as he's revealing all this to Murtaugh, helicopter pops up and Mr. Joshua, Gary Busey, kills him. Kills this buddy of Murtaugh's. And I never will forget Gibson. Riggs takes his pistol. I think it's like a 15-shot clip. And he just goes and unloads it, puts another one in, and I think fires off two clips. I'm like, oh, this guy's a badass. I'm watching this movie all the way to the end. Can't wait to see what happens. Like it just like I was locked in because there was this mystery. You realize the heroes who you like at this point because you have this silly gun range moment, all these moments, but then you were like, oh, they're over their head. This is awesome. How are they going to get out of it? I just think that's such a great turn in the script. It feels like I'm teaching screenwriting to my students right now. And I would have to go back and really look closely at Lethal Weapon, but I think it's the kind of the end of Act 1 going into Act 2, like this turn where, oh, wow, this is not, this is going in another direction now. And it just, I feel like it's captivating. And I think that's what a lot of people miss about Lethal Weapon. It is the charisma of the actors. It's all that, but I think underpinning, like kind of the foundation of Lethal Weapon, is Shane Black's script. Yeah. It's not bad. It's funny. It's good. It's intriguing, and it just keeps propelling you forward all the way to the big climactic, moment in the end, which I love.
I think too, like this in a lot of ways, it played into some tropes, but I think it did a good job of setting other things up. Because what do we get? Maybe a year later, maybe 2 years later, we get like Tango and Cash.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is great.
It's great, but they don't like. There's obviously the tremendous chemistry between the principal actors and that, but at the same time, it's not the same tensions that we feel within Lethal Weapon, though.
Yeah, it isn't, and it's funny. It's like Black in the script keeps building this tension, and it's like every lead they go to, it just doesn't pan out, and they're like, "What? Who are we up against here?" Like they're trying to like get ahead of it, and they just can't because you have his friend getting killed. And then they go to Dixie's place, who's a prostitute who witnessed the daughter's death.
Right.
And, she might know. And then the whole house blows up.
Yeah.
And they find that mercury switch. And they're like, that's when, Riggs knows more than he's like,
Right.
Because there's that scene where the kids are hanging out.
Yeah.
Do you remember what I'm talking about? The kids
like,
what did they look like? Was he
Right.
big guy like me? Like what? And he goes, well, he had a tattoo like you. And he had that special forces tattoo.
Right.
And they're like, we're getting in and over our head. And it's just little things like that sprinkled throughout the script, and the way they play off of each other, Riggs and Murtaugh. It's like you're in more. Of course, you realize Riggs worked for what's called I can't remember if it was called like Shadow Company or something like that, but he was in this special forces unit. He kind of knows the same guys, and there's this kind of like, we're in over our head. And of course, you have some pretty good villains. Of course, the henchman, Gary Busey, is like outstanding as a crazy person. What do you make of Gary Busey, Devin? Like
as a human?
Yeah, just like this guy is just endlessly entertaining. He was incredibly talented.
Yeah.
And just off the rails.
Yes. Those questions like, who would you want to have dinner with? Or who would you want to... I think like that would be entertaining. Like you're going to get your money's worth if you're going out to like lunch or dinner with Gary Busey. I don't know that like... How much of it is acting? That's the thing, right? Like I don't even know how much of it is acting.
I really want
we get the same we pretty much get the same carbon copy of this when 5-6 years later, no less than that, 4 or 5 years later, we get Steven Seagal. Yeah. And then he's partnered with Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that it's just it's chef's kiss. It is just it's mwah. It is chef's kiss.
I mean, he's been a crazy person in a lot of movies. I mean, he's done here's just some of the movies Gary Busey's in. So he was working in the late 60s. But like he was in DC Cab.
Nice.
Which was a favorite of mine as a kid. He was in Stephen King movie called Silver Bullet. Like Corey Haim or Philman's in that. I can't remember which one. But of course he was in Lethal Weapon. Then he was in Predator 2 as one of those like special forces guys with Danny Glover. That was the net. He took 3 years off after Lethal Weapon, and then Predator 2 was his comeback film.
Wow.
So
didn't realize that.
But Lethal Weapon, Predator 2, Point Break.
Classic.
Yeah, Point Break, then Under Siege.
Yeah.
Then he's in The Firm, and he's wonderfully weird in The Firm. And then Rookie of the Year, and it's like, and then it gets crazy. I mean, he was in 2012, he was in Piranha 3 Double D.
Yeah.
So it's just a character, but he was he was recognized, especially early in his career. He made a movie called The Buddy Holly Story.
Yep.
And people were, it was like late 70s, and people
Yeah.
were like, who is this guy? He's so talented.
Yeah.
And this is a movie of some crazy people. Like,
I was just gonna say, like,
it's
do you have there in your notes like who casting director was? Like,
no, I don't. I would have to look it up.
I just like bravo to that person who pulled off the trifecta with those three leads. Good night.
I had a buddy, and it was when I was in seminary, and so this was like early 2000s, and he would he could imitate Busey.
Whoa.
And it was, like that kind of, and he would just find quotes of Busey on the internet, and just like he would just say them.
That's so
He would call me up, leave a voice message, and just imitate Busey. Just like leave, like Busey said some like, go listeners, just go look up great things Busey said, and
make sure the kids are in bed first, though. Yeah.
Yes. But in this film, like, he's Mr. Joshua.
Yeah.
Everyone remembers the scene where, to prove how tough he is, the general McAllister, I think is his name, the main bad guy, has him hold out his arm, and he puts a lighter under his arm. And he just like burns his flesh and doesn't flinch.
Naturally.
He's like,
you didn't do that?
He's like, never. I did the sissy test where I would take an eraser and rub the skin off my hand.
What is that?
Did you ever hear about that?
I've never heard of that.
All right, 80s people. There was this sissy test. I still have a scar on my hand.
What?
Where you would put your hand out and they were like, let's see if you're a sissy. And they would take the eraser of a pencil and just rub the skin off your hand.
I have never heard of that.
So that was around the time freaking Lethal Weapon came out. Probably some sort of, but I mean, you have to really
sure that was a thing.
If not, I got duped. But I wasn't a sissy. My hand was bleeding everywhere. Skin came right off.
We used to do the one where you put like Old Spice deodorant on your jeans and then light it on fire. Did that. Wow.
Oh, there
I
we
never
go.
heard of the eraser thing, man.
There we go.
I think that just maybe happened to little Jeremy and nobody else.
It was a thing. It was an East Coast thing.
So what? But you have a scar, so obviously you were not a sissy.
I wasn't, man. I bled all over the place. My mom was like, "You're a moron. What'd you do?" And I just, I had this kid like take an eraser of a pencil and just
That's glorious.
rapidly erase the skin off my hand. Hey, if you guys that are listening, if you haven't turned it off by now, if you remember the sissy test or some form of it, please let me know that I'm not.
No one's going to admit to that.
No one's going to call. No one's going to do anything. It's all for nothing. The film keeps upping the ante. Of course, we have Trish, who is like Murtaugh's daughter.
Right.
She gets embroiled in all this. She's a model. She kind of gets involved with all these people. Darlene Love, I think, was the actress. And anyway, she gets kidnapped.
Yeah.
And I think as the film keeps upping the ante, my favorite moment of the movie is Gibson is a mile away. And this is when they're going to do the exchange and he's a mile away with his sniper rifle. And Murtaugh goes out there to get his girl, and the bad guys are there, helicopters.
Yes.
And Gibson just starts picking them off from like a mile away. I'm just like, that right there, that's 80s just gold, man.
Yeah.
Like,
it is.
I really don't know the way the script builds to that moment. You've made Gibson or Riggs to be this we get he's a tough guy. We've seen him kind of crazy, there's a scene with the suicidal guy where it's like, oh, you want to jump? Let's jump. And they jump off the building into the big cushion or whatever. And so we know all that stuff, but we haven't seen him let loose yet.
Yeah, because anybody can be crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when you see him just laying in the desert, just picking dudes off, I just think it's one of the great action sequences of the late 80s. I just think it's so good.
It brings up a question just about, you mentioned Shane Black's writing, but what is sometimes difficult with movies like this is to get the pacing off.
Right.
Because you can burn the fuse too quickly.
right.
Or becomes too corny or whatever else.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that really shines through this is And you mentioned like the suspense and tension that builds the intrigue around the mystery. And I think that like Shane Black, as well as, you know, the cast here, they do a good job building to that moment.
Right.
Like you as a viewer, you cannot wait.
Yes.
To be there in that moment.
Yeah. And I remember seeing it in the theater and just the response of the theater. They were just like, oh, that's cool, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember, I think I was able to watch it on videotape right when it came out, and we gathered together, and there's a bunch of dudes that hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
And I was, you know, it's one of those moments where you're like, I can't wait to watch this scene so I can watch these guys' reaction, how cool it is. I had one of those moments the other night. My son's birthday was this past week, and he likes any type of monster movie.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, what can he watch? He's 11.
Yeah.
And so we landed on not really a monster movie, but a fun B movie called Deep Blue Sea.
Nice.
Has sharks in it and all that stuff. But there's a scene where Samuel Jackson gives a big speech, and a shark comes up and bites him and eats him.
Mid-speech.
Yeah. He's like, let's go do this, you know, and the shark. And I'm like, I knew it was coming, and I just quit watching the movie, and I just turned over and looked at my son. I'm like, I'm just going to watch him watch it. His response was just, his mouth. I mean, just what? What? It was great fun, but
glorious.
That's some of the fun of movies, and I think Lethal Weapon is one of those movies where you just really enjoy watching it with people that hadn't seen it.
Right.
When you know when the cool stuff's coming,
and
you can watch them respond to it. It's just a lot of fun.
At your little watch party, did you do the eraser thing or
no? Like, son, give me your hand. Are you a sissy? Dad, I have no skin. Oh gosh. So you have like the big kind of sniper scene doesn't go to plan, even though Riggs kills like half the guys. They get captured, and it's a good script to study. I wish I could use it to teach my students. It's just the content is a rated R film. I can't pull it off in high school.
Yeah.
But the script structure is so good because you think they're going to get out of it. They don't. They get captured, and then they're like getting tortured.
Right.
Like you have Gibson like all hung up, being electrocuted.
Right.
Then you have, you know, like Murtaugh's been shot in the shoulder. They pour salt.
Good times.
Into his wound. Yeah. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Take that to your little eraser test buddies.
The heroes are not doing good here. Yeah. And then you have, of course, Gibson gets away, he fakes like he's out, and then he strangles a guy that's in Die Hard and steals the candy bars, and then he takes that guy out, which, by the way, I need to figure out who that guy is because I'm going to be making, I think his name's Al Leong, as I think's his name. Yes, it is. Al Kabong Leong is his name. But anyways, anyone that's listening to this that liked 80s movies would know it. He sort of was balding, but he had long hair.
Yeah.
Great martial artist.
Yeah.
I'm doing a video of the most overlooked, like underrated martial arts scenes.
Wow.
And there's a movie called Rapid Fire with Brandon Lee.
Oh.
And it's sort of like Brandon Lee's kind of his first like really like he's the central character. It's a martial arts film. Like he's the star. And he has a fight with Al Leong that is incredible. It's an incredible martial arts fight.
I'm gonna have to check this out.
Yeah, you could like YouTube just the fight.
It's subscribe to your channel.
But I'm making a video about that coming up. But
will you be reenacting things in your videos here?
I'm gonna be like that guy with a lightsaber, that fat kid that's spinning the lightsaber around. This is gonna be me. I'm gonna be Brandon Lee.
Patrons for the cost of the next tier of patronage and membership. Jeremy reenact karate sequences from 80s films.
As long as they all wear shirts and I don't have to be shirtless, I'll do it. Oh, God. So Gibson and Glover, they escape. There's a really cool little character beat that Murtaugh has that I love about Lethal Weapon, where he kind of rolls his neck, his head, and he's like in the zone.
Yes.
And he does it, of course, in the scene earlier where they're doing the target practice.
Right.
But he does it and shoots him dead center. It's just a great moment. And And that's why I love Lethal Weapon is like, you know, Mel Gibson doesn't get all the awesome stuff. Like Murtaugh gets some too.
Yeah.
And I love that sequence. And then of course it builds and builds and builds until you have the fight in the front yard.
Yeah.
And what's great is he's arrested. Like Mr. Joshua is arrested. He goes in there to kill the family. They trick him and he's arrested, but then they let him go because Gibson goes, "Hey, you want a shot at the title?" And I'm only in the 80s does this happen, and thank God it does. They have a great fight in the front yard, a little MMA action.
Yeah,
it's a great fist fight, like one of the better fist fights of the 80s.
Yeah,
and Gary Busey's actually believable as a guy that can fight, and it's a great sequence. You have these great action things throughout, but the humor is just, I think it's the mixture of the two that makes this film so special, don't you?
I think, you know, as the series goes on, you know, I think it's in Lethal Weapon 2 where Murtaugh's house is getting remodeled.
Yes, toilet scene, all that stuff.
Well, and like, you know,
the nail gun,
nailed them both, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm just like,
yeah,
that's a little bit of a misfire, but like, and in so many cases, right? The original tends to be better than subsequent renditions of it. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that it does well. Going back to what we talked about earlier, is like the quote unquote buddy cop, but both of them play their parts so well.
Yeah.
And it's so well written that the humor is believable from these characters. That's the thing, right? No one's going to say nailed them both when they put a nail gun to a guy. But, well, I mean, we might now. But anyway, but I think, yes, that the humor of the original is unmatched in the latter versions of it.
I think so. I do. If someone is like adamant that 2 is better than 1, I'll listen to it because I do think there's some really great moments in 2.
Yeah.
And of course it made more money because of all the popularity that 1 garnered.
Yeah.
You know, but there's just something like, it feels, even though there is 48 hours out there.
Yeah.
Lethal Weapon does feel like fresh and new in a sense. And I think the chemistry is some of the best that we see. There's a movie called Midnight Run that has De Niro in it, and I can't remember the actor's name. He's a comedian, but anyways, it was the chemistry in that film. Great, Charles Grodin.
Yeah,
was the guy with De Niro, and that's a great kind of a buddy. It's a road movie though, and it's great chemistry. But there's only a few movies like this where the chemistry between the two male leads are so good, and I think Lethal Weapon just kind of like stands above everyone else, and you know they milked it. I mean, there's like so many sequels. There's 3 sequels. There's a TV show that worked until I think the lead actor got into something he shouldn't have, and then like
seems to be a trend.
Yeah. And of course, the film ends. Riggs visits his wife's grave. He's trying to make peace with everything. Throughout the film, he's suicidal. His life's falling apart. You know, he finds some meaning by kind of latching on to Murtaugh's family.
Yeah.
And, you know, he goes and shares Christmas Day meal with them.
Yeah.
And, you know, he gives Murtaugh that, I think he gives him that, like, bullet, the hollow point bullet. And like, I'm not going to need this anymore.
Right.
And, I think that's a great way to script an ending. And they kind of are like, who's driving? You driving? I'm driving. Like they go back to like this odd couple. And it's like, as you're sitting there in the audience, you are like, okay, when's the next one?
Yeah.
Like that you immediately are like, okay, I'll hang out with these guys again. Cause that was so much fun.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but people are making movies and shows and everything for sequels.
Sure.
And they're setting them up as sequels and all that stuff, but I don't get that feeling much anymore when I watch all the new stuff being made, because you know, you have all these consolidated media conglomerates and they got to make more material, got to have your sequels and all that stuff, and this just feels organic. And I don't know if they were planning on making a sequel, but the way it ends, it's like, all right, when's your next case? Because I'm ready to just jump on board. I mean, did you feel that way too?
I think that's right. And I think that, you touch on something there where now more than ever, not just cinema, but with so many streaming services that are vying for consumer dollars, that are they're churning out content like never before. And you even said at the top of the pod, like, this is in the theater for months.
Right.
And when this last summer Top Gun 2 was in the theater for a couple months, it just seemed like that's still in the theater because we become so used to things being around for maybe 6 weeks. Yeah. If it's doing well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me ask this though, because we look back at 1987. We're in a very different world right now.
Right.
Does a film like that, with a police officer that's a little unhinged, does that play to modern audiences?
I doubt it. If you do something like that, it has to be more dramatic.
Yeah. It
can't be kind of jokey.
Right.
It can't be, if you remember the Christmas tree scene at the beginning.
Yeah.
Where he busts those guys where all the Christmas trees are.
Right.
And he does the Three Stooges. Pokes the guys and he goes, this is gun, and it's like,
maybe not.
I don't know if we can do that. Yeah. It's good in a sense that we have the sensitivity to what's going on in our world.
For sure.
It's sad also that we can't sometimes just have fun.
Well, it would be interesting too. And again, this isn't a critique of anything. This is just purely asking the question. But when you look at diversity and stuff, if we were just to flip-flop the race of Riggs and Murtaugh, does that make it more palatable for today's audience? I don't know. Maybe not.
I would be curious. And I know that there's plans. Of course, the TV show came out. They kept the same racial, it was still Murtaugh's black. Right. Riggs is white. But, they keep talking about what's coming next, and I'm real curious if they will play with that, that where the races are with what characters. It'd be fascinating to see what they decide to do. I haven't heard anything lately, so I don't know if the project has been shelved or what. But listen to this. I mean, this is right when the movie came out. The Washington Post described it as a vivid, visceral reminder of just how exciting an action film can be.
Oh.
New York Times said the film is all fast action, noisy stunts, and huge, often unflattering close-ups, but it packs an undeniable wallop. Ebert, 4 out of 4 stars.
Whoa!
Says Donner tops himself.
Whoa!
So the master himself comes rolling in and says, this is a 4 out of 4 star film. You just can't beat it.
You don't get that very often. All right, so here's what I'm going to ask then, Jeremy.
All right.
1987.
Yes.
Do you go Lethal Weapon or Predator? You can only pick one.
Yeah, I'm curious, what Carl, our intern, would say.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking about top 5 Arnie films.
Yeah.
I think I'm going Predator, man.
I mean, it's the logical answer.
I think I'm going Predator. It's hard though. I mean, it's really hard to say no to Lethal Weapon.
But it is an interesting too that so here like you mentioned this connection before, but Predator 2, not so great. Lethal Weapon 2, arguably the best of the franchise.
Yeah, people really will fight for it and say no. And I mean, you got everything. You got weird apartheid stuff going on in Lethal Weapon 2. You got Patsy Kensick in Lethal Weapon 2 as the love interest. But you also have this revelation of what happened to Riggs' wife.
Right.
And some pretty good action sequences. I don't know if people remember, but Riggs pulls down the house with his truck.
Who didn't want to go buy a dually truck after that? My goodness.
I mean, there's some really good stuff, but I'll take the sniper sequence any day. There's just something special about that. All right, so we got next week. We're in the Christmas season, but we're going to talk genre action movies. So we'll be doing Be Kind Rewind. Be talking probably a little bit about Arnold Schwarzenegger because we want to talk about Total Recall in the coming weeks. So pay attention to those things dropping on the audio feed. Video stuff, we got of course the series we're doing on 80s movies I missed. Lone Wolf McQuaid is coming up with Chuck Norris. Nice. Can't believe I've never seen it. So I'm just going through lists of movies and I'm just highlighting the ones I haven't seen and doing like film reviews of it. So head on over to YouTube, check that out. I'm also doing the best movie Harrison Ford was ever in. I'm doing a video on Witness. So that'll be coming out around the Christmas holidays. Nothing like some Amish storytelling for Christmas. So, so listeners, thanks so much for listening. And as always, we'll see you in a week.